Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Mario WX's radio station. This is Christopher, WX0CAS, here on the WX0CAS channel. Alright, well, we got a couple little bit of housekeeping assignments that we're going to be working here on October 11th. We're going to be letting you guys know that this episode starts our new time frame. We're not going to be doing 30-minute casts. They're going to be 45-minute length episodes now. We want to get a little extra information to you guys because, I mean, really, we need as much information as we possibly can get to you for all this disaster preparedness. In addition to that, starting today, we will have our new times of our podcast being automatically distributed to you all. We're going to have one on Friday. That would be today. And starting next week, it'll be every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we will have a podcast coming right to your door. So if you haven't already gone to our automatic downloads on our podcast, go ahead and do that now. We're on, Spotify. We're here on Spreaker. If you guys have a Spreaker account, you can automatically get that RSS notification to your computer. We're also on the Google Podcast, so for those of you who are Android users, go forth and find us there. Easiest thing to do when any of these, use my call sign, WX0CAS. Find me on any of those there. Also, we're on the Apple Podcast, and newly added, we're on iHeartRadio. So be sure to subscribe, get those automatic updates for you so you never have to miss an episode of one of our podcasts. Today we're going to be talking about a wonderful thing called communications information. We constantly talk about what communications are in disasters, and we always need communications during disaster. But we never really talk about what needs to be said during these communications. So in today's episode, what we're going to be talking about is what's to be said, the information that you need to know. Are we looking at things like, well, where am I? Or where are you? Stuff like that. So what we're going to start off with is communications between each other. We all have this big old deal, little deal. Most of us have a full-time job that we have to go to, which most of us don't get to stay at home and work at home. So that means that the time away from home is greater than the time at home, which also means that there is an increased chance that we won't be at home during a disaster. So the biggest thing to know is what communications do we have as a family. For instance, in my family, we all have cell phones. Except for my little one. I have a 8-month-old. He's not quite old enough for a cell phone yet, but he'll get there eventually. We also have ham radios through my family as well. And all of the houses have an actual ham radio in them with the tower and antenna already set up. But also our cars do as well. So if something were to happen and the cell towers go down, we still have the capability of getting onto our ham radio or amateur radio and connecting to each other to be able to get things set up. The whole concept of having an amateur radio, as we talked about in our last episode, was to have communications even when the cell tower grid goes down. Now, if you don't have your ham radio system set up yet, then you still are be relying on phones and cell phones. Don't get me wrong, if the cell towers didn't go down, or a disaster hasn't shut down the power, or there's not an influx of people getting onto the cell phone towers, they're still a very viable unit to use, especially if you're just getting started. I'm not saying you start, the only way you're prepared for disaster is if you have a ham radio. No. Doesn't work that way. We just encourage amateur radio because it doesn't have as many limitations to it as the cell phones do. And that's why it's a really good communications platform. So let's say you have your cell phone or you have a home phone. Some people have home phones still. If you subscribe to a company like Comcast or Xfinity or CenturyLink, anything like that, most of those home phones are actually called VoIP, VoIP, Voice over Internet Protocol. And we talked about that before a little bit on how VoIP is reliant on power grid. And at any point of that power grid fails, the system goes down. One of the reasons why they have a notification on there that says, for emergency 911, your home phone may or may not be able to be used during a time of need as a fact of blah, 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 and the card just keeps on going. That's one of the downsides for having a VoIP is you have to have power. So, for instance, if your house loses power, your router goes down. Your router has no capability of connecting to the network. Therefore, you have no home phone. Simplest solution to fix that: plug into a battery backup for it. I actually have a battery that I got that I really, really like that has a 110 power inverter built into the battery box itself. With the battery pack that I have, you can plug it into the house wall, keep it plugged in, and it keeps the battery maintained. It'll always keep it fully charged. And when the power goes out, I have 4 hours of 110 power that is on that battery. So if I really needed to get contacts out, I can be able to start my network back up at my house and run off that 110 power inverter. If I have DC power, like my amateur radio, that battery will actually last 3 days. I did that test with my radio. I can run my radio for 3 days solid, all day, all night on, and transmitting here and there, because when you have your radio on, just sitting on, it doesn't take a lot of power. When you transmit, that's where it becomes the power hungry. Well, my system runs off of the DC power off that battery, so I can run 3 days of power time, which is great. That's what I got that battery for. But having the capability of charging my laptop, it takes about an hour and a half to fully charge my laptop battery, and then it runs on its own for 3.5 hours. So I can be able to plug in for an hour and a half, get a charge, turn off the 110 power inverter, and I have my laptop fully charged and I can use my laptop still. But that extends my laptop battery for a full day. I can run off of that concept. In addition, my battery not only gets charged by house power, but also can get charged by DC power from a car, but it also has the capability of being charged by solar panel. So if I get the next concept of being a solar panel with it, will allow me to charge it even when the power is out and my car won't start and all that stuff. I've still got the ability to start that battery up. And then theoretically, I have a continuous power supply because as long as the sun's up, I have power. That's the concept. But of course, everything has its limitations. Now, if you are on your house, power goes out, plug into a battery concept like this, or if you have a generator. A lot of people may have small generators. For instance, I have one for my camper. I use it when we go out camping. The small generator has just enough power to really give me some energy for a small refrigerator or all my computers when I have my camper out there, some lights, stuff like that. It just kind of is good to have that. Limitation to a generator. If you're in an apartment like me, you can't quite run that very easily. People kind of get a little offended when you turn a generator on in the middle of the day or even in the middle of the night. So it's not as easy. But if you have a house, you can go down to Walmart or Lowe's, Home Depot, get yourself a small generator. The best thing to do is find one that will power up what you want. If you're going to be wanting everything in your house powered, now you're going to be talking a couple of thousands of dollars to be able to get, tens of thousands of dollars to get a whole home generator that can be set up for your house. If you're like me and you only want a few things ran, then getting your small little Honda, I think, makes a little generator. It's like $150, $200. Will get you a really good size generator that can power a few things. Not quite appliance level like your refrigerator, but computers, lights, maybe even your furnace. If you got a furnace that you need to keep heat for, something like that can be able to help out. And if you're not quite sure what level you need, there's a lot of online resources that you can be able to use that helps break down the math of if you have this big of a generator, it powers this much of the equipment that you're working with, and it will help you narrow down what you want. For me, I have an electric oil radiated heater for our backup heater, and if I plug my generator into that, I have plenty of heat for that one room that I'm putting up there. Just make sure that if you use a generator, you leave the generator outside in a well-ventilated area, and keep track of the fuel usage so you can be able to keep extra fuel on hand to be able to keep it running. But there's definitely different qualifications or different avenues that you can be able to use to be able to make this generator or this power that you need. In addition to saying your house goes out of power, let's say that you plug everything back in because you got your generator and everything, and you're going to plug in to your house phone, and it's still saying it has no connection. That means that your neighborhood server may have also gone down too. And a lot of times that is the case. You have to use all these server points that have to be powered up. And if they lose power, your whole community loses the phones. But let's just say for this scenario, you are the only house affected. You and your neighborhood's affected, but your community's network is still online. So you successfully powered up your phone system. Now you can make contact to your family. And you can be able to make those reach outs. If you've got your husband, your wife, they're out and about at work, you can give them a contact and say, hey, we're okay, power went out, we're fine. But pretty much that's all the contact you have. If you have a cell phone with you and you use that, great. The main thing that we want to encourage everyone to have is a communications platform. Just start with one. You don't need to have 10,000 platform concept devices and sink $10,000s of dollars into making all these devices. One thing we just very much encourage is that you get something. So if you have a cell phone, start with that. Put that in your communications plan. If you've got cell phone and ham radio, great. Put that in your communications plan. If you work down the street from your house and you can use like the family radios, the little cheapo Walmart ones you can get for $20-$30 at Walmart, put that in your plan because it's a communications device. Something that you guys can be able to use. Make something primary and then bring up something as a secondary. If this fails, we use this. In my house, it's very simple. We have our cell phones as our primary. If cell phones go down, then we go into ham radio, just as our default. Some people like to say, okay, if the cell phones go down, now we're going to go to the family radios because we're close by. Something simple like that. As long as you have some form of communication in addition to. And sometimes our cell towers may go out, but our internet may still be up and running. So we also have it as if our cell phones go down, we'll go to our computers. If the computers are still working, we'll try and contact each other using Facebook. Because if I've got no cell service in my area, but my wife is on the other side of town and she has cell service, I can still message her through Facebook and it goes to her phone. Now we both have still communications with each other. And that's just a concept that we want to work with, is having communications back and forth. When we get back from our first break here, and you're going to notice we're going to now have 2 breaks on our time, going to 45 minutes. We're still doing our 15-minute blocks, so we're going to go to our first break here. After our first break, now we're going to get into what do we need to say when we communicate with each other. And we're really going to get into the details on how to get as much information out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The main thing is most of your communication should be done before a disaster. This way, when we actually have a disaster, everyone's already on the same page of, okay, when I contact you, this is what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to do this, 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 and this. And everything's already going to be laid out. There's quite a bit of material out there to be used, and I'm going to explain that on this next break as well, on what materials that we have capable to use out there. So, we'll be right back after these short messages, and as soon as we come back, what do we need to say when we're doing our communications? Communications is key. We always need to communicate with each other. Every single time we go out and about and we talk to someone, that's communications. But when we are in a disaster, it's kind of a mind-boggling point where we need to know, okay, what do we need to say? How do we need to say it? What information do we need to give? That's where this is going to come in. Before a disaster strikes is the best time to create your communications plan. And we're going to talk a lot about this on our next episode when we get into communications with the family. How to get the whole family prepared for if something goes wrong. So the main thing that we want to work with is if you guys have a computer access, the best thing to do is go to ready.gov, ready.gov. They're a wonderful resource. Everything we talk about getting your family prepared is connected with ready.gov or Ready Colorado. That's one of our other versions that we have. FEMA has some amazing stuff as well. The American Red Cross. And we've got all these different points. And when we access one of them, we'll go ahead and put a link here on there to show you what web page there are. So if you look at the information details, we have the ready.gov on there. And it's going to be on our episodes quite a bit. But what do we say when we're in communications? First thing is first, take care of the family. You want to make sure that everyone's safe. So let's say, for our situation, cell phones are still working for this disaster. We don't know what disaster it is. It could be a fire. It could be a snowstorm. It could be anything. We're just going to say cell phones still work, and we have got no problems with cell phones. So you call up your spouse and say, okay, I'm at work. I'm 35 minutes away from home. Okay, now you've identified the first part of this deal. Where are you? The best thing to be able to know is, where is your significant other? For me, I'm constantly always worried when something could happen just because of what I'm doing, because of the emergency management side that I work with. But you always want to know where each other's at. Next thing to say is, if you're safe, say that you're safe. Tell that to the other person. Hey, I'm over here at the office. I'm 30 minutes away from you. I'm safe. How are you? Now, relay the information again. I'm at home. I'm with our son. We're both okay. We're both safe. Now what? Depending on the situation, it may be a shelter-in-place situation where you both have to stay away. Now, I'll give you the prime example of that one that actually happened to me shortly after my son was born. About a month after my son was born, we had this wonderful thing called a bomb cyclone. And in a future episode, we're actually going to talk more in detail what a bomb cyclone is, what happened during the bomb cyclone here in Colorado in 2019, and also how we were prepared for it. But in this one, we're just going to touch a little bit on it. I was driving for a company that would go from our city to Denver. We went from Colorado Springs to Denver constantly. I was actually stuck halfway between Denver and Colorado Springs when the bomb cyclone hit. And I ended up having to spend 24 hours in the bus that I was driving for the bomb cyclone. Now, like I said before, I work with emergency management stuff. So I already knew, hey, I needed to pack a go bag, which we're going to be talking about in a few episodes. How to prepare for food and water for in case I got stuck. How am I going to stay warm if I got stuck? And pretty much that whole concept. And we go into that further details when we get into go bags. So I already had all my equipment with me, including communications back with my wife. So I get stuck. I'm now an hour and 20 minutes away from home, and all the roads have shut down. Going north, going south, I'm literally stuck in the middle. I can't go anywhere. Well, my wife and I did the communication. Okay, best thing that we're going to do for this is we're both going to shelter in place. Sheltering in place is very, very, very important when you say that you're going to do that. That means you're not going to leave your shelter. For instance, my shelter was the bus that I was in. Now, I had enough food that I packed for 2 days. I had enough water in that bus for 2 days. I had enough equipment to keep me warm for 2 days. And because I was in the bus, I was able to keep the engine running for the time that I was stuck and was able to keep the bus warm itself. So I didn't have to utilize any of my other emergency warming kits. I had hot pads. I had those body warmers, the stuff that we normally would take when we go hunting. When we talk about go bags, we'll explain to you, you don't need top-of-the-line, high-end, safety survival equipment. When we get into go bags, we'll talk about how to build one of these on a budget. And by a budget, I mean less than $250 you can be able to get away with actually having a go bag and having all the equipment that you need. and not having to worry about, do I have everything? And we'll go into that in a little bit later. So I communicate with my wife. I am in Castle Rock. I am stuck here in a bus. We're going to shelter in place. I'm safe. I'm okay. I've got everything I need. I even brought entertainment with me. I brought my laptop and a power supply and DVDs. So I had entertainment to watch as well. Because that's another thing that during a disaster we don't ever think about is our mental status. Our mental health is a huge aspect when it comes to disasters. Because if we let ourselves get past that mental capability, we could actually work ourselves up into a frantic state and can actually make the situation worse than if we just stayed calm, stayed relaxed, and we're actually able to process and work through the equation that we have to go through. Granted, a lot of people can do this a lot easier than others, but I'm one of those people that can be easy for me. But my wife, it takes a little longer for her to get through that, which is fine. That's why we work together. She then informed me that my son was safe, our son was safe, and that she was safe too. They never lost power here at the house. They ended up being perfectly fine. Everything was great. And I ended up being safe as well because of the preparation I took beforehand. That's the key to a disaster, is to identify what's coming before it shows up. And the main thing is, once we got through that communication, we then determined another check-in time. Because this event lasted 24 hours. We determined that at that time, the first check-in, that I was going to check in with her every 2 hours. That was our agreed upon time frame. And before you end your call, say, our next communication attempt is going to be at this time. The reason why I say the word attempt is, okay, the cell phones work right now, but they may not work in 2 hours. Granted, I knew our infrastructure that we had set up and we were going to be okay. We didn't have to worry about the connection problems because not only did I have my cell phone, but I also had all my other ham radio equipment, everything with me. So no matter what, I was able to try and get communication to her in some way or another. But we ended up using cell phones for the entire 24-hour event. In addition to communicating with my wife, I was also communicating with my base office because, like I said, I was stuck in between Denver and Colorado Springs. So my employer, where the radio system is set up, is in Denver. So they're trying to keep in communication with me as well. And we determined, since we were using our radios, that it was at this time frame, I will check in. And every 2 hours after I would contact my wife, I would get on the radio and I'd contact my office and say, okay, I'm here. Everything's fine. My status is warm, fed, and hydrated. I'm okay. This is not just to be able to say, hey, I'm here. It's also to keep those lines of communication open. The main thing that keeps more people more anxiety is less information. So in other words, if I contact my wife every hour she knows what's going on, and it'll keep her anxiety level down. I also can keep my anxiety level down because now I've contacted her every hour. We physically can't see each other, so we kept in contact. And granted, I could have stayed on the phone with her for the whole 24 hours, which would have been fine. I had the power, she had power, we were all fine. But still keeping the concept of you want to make sure you get the communications out when you go. When you get into a disaster and there's an emergency, such as someone has fallen and they now have an open gash, an open wound, or a broken bone was in result to, let's say it was snowing and you were outside trying to do whatever. And I mean, it could be something as simple as going outside to refueling your generator so you have power. And you slipped on the staircase coming back and you broke your arm. Now we're talking an emergency status. So our communications to emergency personnel are going to be different than communications to our family. Our family is pretty much simple check-in. This is what I've got. This is what we're doing. This is how we're going to take the next 2 hours. And just take it section by section. We don't really want to get in too much detail over our everything. when we're going into the emergency side. We want to do the same thing. Get in, get the information, get off the radio, or get off the phone, or get out of whatever we're communicating them with. Because 911 is now going to be overwhelmed with all these calls. And one of the downsides is 911 will get a continuous bombardment of calls that are unrelated to an actual emergency. And it's actually tying up their phone lines for emergency contacts. For instance, there was an incident, I believe it was in Houston, Texas. Not one of the flooding deals, but for just a different low impact disaster there. They said that on their 911 dispatchers, out of their 100% call log, only 16% actually was emergency contact, emergency communications that were people who were needing help. The entire rest of it was questions on, well, when's the storm going to end? When can I go home? When can the roads reopen? 911 is not set up for that kind of information. One of the things that you can look at is most communities, most counties or cities or actual communities as well, have a information phone number. Call this number and we can give you that kind of information. How long is the snow supposed to last here? How long until the road I-25 is going to be reopened to get to Denver? Because my family is in Denver and I'm stuck here in a hotel in Colorado Springs. That's where that information number comes into play. Trying to keep as much of the phone volume off of the 911 dispatcher so that they can be able to make that 100% of calls be more like 80% of our calls were emergency calls. The other thing, too, is a lot of these 911 centers, they're limited to the manpower that they have there due to budget restraints, due to the disaster has now made that I only have half of my staff here because it was something that happened just quickly. A quick disaster could mean that you only have your normal amount of staff. You weren't ready for a 3-time, 4-time call volume. That can also increase the time frame to be able to get a call into 911 for an emergency. If people keep calling in with, well, I'm over here at such and such street and the snow is 12 inches deep, when is it supposed to stop? That entire conversation for 911 to say, is there really an emergency? Well, no, I just want information. Well, you can't call here. It takes time away from the emergency call. Because for all you know, there could be another call right after that one that says, I went out to refuel my generator and I slipped on the ice when I came back inside because it's cold out and I was cold and I wanted to get into the warmth, so I wasn't really thinking too much and I rushed inside, and now my arm is broken and it's turning a funny color. Now it's an emergency call because you have a physical injury. Even if it wasn't turning a funny color, it's still a physical injury and help needs to be sent. Those kind of calls are very important. When we come back from the second break, we're going to talk about what information goes to 911, what information should you already have in place to be able to assist the 911 operator to making your call faster, and also what information should you use for the information line. We talked a little bit about now, but more detailed on what to work with that. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast and give you some more details on communication do's and don'ts. So be right back with you guys shortly. Enjoy this commercial break, and we'll be back here in just a few moments. 911, where is the location of this emergency? That's usually the question that's asked right away because they want to know where you're at. before you contact 911, you should get a rough idea of where you're at. If you're at your home, you should already know your home address. If you're at work, you should already know your work address. But let's say you're out on the road and you're on, for instance, we have a road here, it's called Highway 24. Let's say you're on Highway 24. Well, where are you? Give a best estimate on where you are. Let's say for this scenario that we're going to be bringing up, it's just the bomb cyclone has come up. We're on 24 and we're driving east. There are multiple towns out there, but we're going to say our closest town is Calhoun. When we are on the road at all times, even when the disaster is there or even when there's no disaster, we should try and be aware of where we are on the road. If you can, keep track of the mile marker post that you just passed. You can say, hey, I passed mile marker post number 101 about 20 minutes ago. I'm going east. Okay, now 911 dispatch can say, well, you're not going to be west of mile marker 101. You're east of mile marker 101. Now they can be able to narrow down the search to find you. So for this scenario, you are stuck in your car. Bomb cyclone is hit. You are trying to get home. You live out in the middle of the prairie land, and all of a sudden you slide off the road because ice on the road, snow on the road, and the wind shifted your car and it caused you to spin, and now you slid off the highway. If you're on the section that has a deep ravine, no one's going to be able to see your headlights or tail lights, especially if the visibility doesn't even go past the front end of the hood. They're not going to see you. You have cell phone communication. Thank the Lord. Everything's okay with this. Again, we're just bringing cell phones because that's going to be the most common use for a disaster is cell phones. You call 911. Now you hear the tone you don't want to hear. The continuous ringing. It keeps ringing. It keeps ringing. You're in pain. You don't know what's going on. You're still in shock over you slid off the road. It keeps ringing. It keeps ringing. After a while, you check your phone. You've been on a ringing for 5 minutes at 911. This is because some people use 911 for non-emergency communication. When you get long time frames, people can get frustrated when you can't get help. And that everyone's seen that commercial for what is that button? Life Alert, where when you press the button, it's instantly someone's there. How can I help you? Everyone expects that. When you are in need of help, you want help right now because you need it right now. You're on hold for 5 minutes waiting for a dispatcher at 911 to answer your call because they've got so many calls coming in. They're constantly next call, next call, next call, next call, next call, next call, and they're constantly working with you. Your worst day is there every day. They're constantly on the phone with somebody trying to get them the help that they need. And the number one thing that is frustrating, not only on the dispatcher side, but on the 911 in general, is someone calling in and saying, well, when's the snow supposed to stop? That's not 911's job. So if you can remember a very simple thing, 911 is for emergencies only. When you need help, for instance, you're stuck, you have no heat source, you have no food, you have no water, you need help. That's where 911 comes in. You're at home. You've got a fireplace going with a nice little log. You got your pantry full of food. You got water. Everybody's safe. No one's sick. No one's hurt. 911 is not the contact number for you. Your local information number is your contact info for you. Take all those calls away from 911. Put it onto the local information line. Because that's their job too. They get staffed with other individuals who are there to be able to get the information to you. Or, if you've got television, get your information from the news. If you still have internet, A lot of the news stations are now pushing, we talked about it before, social media. They're now pushing tweets, Facebook messages, stuff like that for information updates on the storm. What's going on? What do you need to know? That's where all that information is for you, to try and keep the basic calls off of 911. So let's say you've been on hold now. You're on hold for 10 minutes. And you're getting cold now because when you drove off the road, your engine shut down. You can't get it restarted. Your car's damaged. And you have no heat now. Your car is a metal box surrounded by cold air. Your cold air surroundings are now leaking into the car. It's creating a inversion against the windows, and the windows are cooling the air, and the metal is cooling the air on the inside of your car. It's getting cold now, only after just 10 minutes of being in the car. Your first thought is, well, I'm going to get cold. I'm not going to freeze to death. I'm just going to walk out of my car. Don't do that. The reason why you just went into the ditch is because the storm outside caused bad visibility. You can't see. You got pushed off the road because of ice patch. It's more dangerous for you outside the car than inside the car. So stay inside the car. Also, staying inside the car allows emergency workers to actually have a larger object to find you. And you're actually protected more by being inside of those walls from the wind, from the snow, from more thermal inversion. 911 finally answers your call. 911, where's your location? By now, that whole time you're on hold, you should have been thinking about these questions that they're going to ask you. Where am I? I passed mile marker 101 about 20 minutes ago. I know I was heading east towards Calhoun. I got to be really close to Calhoun by now. Okay, cool. Now they know where you are. Okay, what's the nature of your emergency? I'm stuck. I drove off the road. Something simple like that. You want to keep your answers short, simple, and fact point driven. I drove off the road. I got pushed off the road. I was in a car crash. Something very quick and simple. They don't need to know the whole thing of, well, I was driving at 45 miles per hour heading east on the interstate, and the wind set my back end moving, and now I'm slid all around, and all of a sudden now I'm on the side of the road, and they don't need to know all that. Just, I slid off the road. Okay. Now, they know you're in a disabled car, they know roughly where you're at, and they know you're going to need help. So right there, they can start getting somebody moving towards you. Just right there on that simple 15, 20-second conversation you already had. Now the dispatcher's going to get some more information. Are you in pain? Yes. Where are you in pain at? My legs are in pain. I can feel pain in my upper legs. Okay. Now they send that information to the paramedics. He's in pain. Granted, you just drove off the side of the road 45 miles an hour. You're probably going to be in pain. Did you lose consciousness? No. Simple, short, yes, no answers are the best things for these guys. If they want more details, they'll ask you for more details. The faster that you can be able to get your information to the 911 dispatcher, the faster they can get and help to you, and the faster they can get to the next person. Sometimes they may even say, are you okay at the point now that we can disconnect the call because we have help on the way? Other times, they may say, we're going to stay on the line with you. We're going to make sure that help arrives. Once help arrives, we're disconnecting the call because now you've been handed off to the next person. It all depends on the situation of what's going on and how bad your situation is. We're going to say that you didn't break anything on this car collision. You just got some bumps and bruises from it. Seatbelt bruised your shoulder. Your knees went into the dash. The standard, normal, everyday, I hit something collision deals. Nothing too major. Paramedics are on their way. Okay. And the dispatcher may say, are you okay or do you need me to stay on the phone? I don't need you anymore. I just need to know paramedics are going to come get me. Now, if they don't know exactly where you are, they're probably going to stay on the phone because they're going to be in radio communication with the paramedics or the fire department looking for your car. And they may say, do you see lights? Do you hear the truck? What do you see, to be able to help navigate the fire department to you? Let's say they stay on the phone for you. Fire truck's on his way. You knew you were going east. They're coming east as well. And they got the big giant spotlight. And all of a sudden you see this bright light that's just heading closer to you. They may ask you, do you see a large light? Yes, I do. It's big and white. Okay, cool. Fire department, you're getting close. And then you might say, well, the light just went away. It went past me. Stop. They're right behind you. Now they know almost exactly where you are, and they'll send the crew down to come get you. That's how 911 system is designed for, getting help to you as quickly and efficiently as possible. Now, if you were like me, stuck in a bus, you have heat, you have food, you have water, you have shelter from the wind, you're not being directly affected by the storm, that is where you don't need to call 911. I'm okay. If you have all the capability of staying alive, you'll be okay. They may send help for you, and you might get someone come knock on the door of your car if you're stuck on the highway, saying, come with us, we're going to take you to a shelter. Take it. But you don't need to call 911 every 10 minutes to find out where help is because you're stuck on the road. And when people warn you, when the counties or the states or the governor, anybody warns you to evacuate an area or don't go out in a storm or any of those, heed those warnings. They're very important. The more warnings that you heed, the safer that you are. Now we're going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast with a simple do's and don'ts of communication. We only got a few minutes left to go through this. Communication do's. Do always keep your information short and to the point. Don't keep going and giving all the minute details that are not as big of a point. For instance, you drove off the road. Like we said, you don't have to say how fast you're going, where you're going, any of that. Simple and to the point. I was going east on 24. I passed mile marker 101. I'm almost to Callahan, and I slid off the road. Done. Do make sure that you keep the mental state of being in check. If you're going to be talking to your family, if you're going to be talking to anybody, make sure that they know you're okay if you're okay. If you're not okay, tell them you're not okay. Don't overestimate anything when you're working with the communication. If you are, or not estimate, exaggerate. If you've got a broken leg, say you've got a broken leg. Details that can trigger those things for your family might send them into a panic. But don't lie to them and tell them everything's okay when you have a leg broken. That doesn't work well for your family. Do make sure that when you're communicating, you communicate in a clear and effective manner. Don't go quicker than you can be able to process, and don't slur everything together. Take a couple deep breaths, work through it, and make sure that your communications are clear and concise. The more times you say the longer your information takes to get to the help you need. Keep it calm, keep it cool, keep it collected. The final do of communications is do have a backup. Your cell phones may be your primary in your family, as they are on mine. Don't rely on one information all the time. If your cell phones are number one, make sure you have something as a number two, just in case if those go down. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode. We thank you guys so much for joining us here on WX0CAS. Our next episode is going to be more detail on communications for the family. And we're going to be working with what you need to work on more detailed as a family together. So thank you again. Look forward to seeing you guys in just a few days. Have a great day. podcast is a part of the Murillo Disaster Education Program. To learn more, visit www.murillowx.org. Intro song by Scott Holmes, Hot Shot, and credit song by Lobo Loco, Old West Ring. All recordings are copyrighted 2019. To use in educational settings, email us at contactus@murillowx.org.